Hi, everybody. My name is Cassidy Quistorf. I'm the Executive Director of Klamath Film, and today we're so excited to be talking with Giorgio Litt, who is the CEO and creative mind behind Soul of Wit Productions, and is also the filmmaker behind Vagrant. So, Giorgio, thank you so much for being here today and for being a part of KIFF this year.
I'm glad to be here and thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so thrilled to be showing Vagrant in this year's festival since we are an Oregon-based film festival. We don't
Yeah,
often get a lot of submissions that are filmed in a different country that are international.
not surprised.
But it's really great. It brings such a cultural diversity to our festival and just something really unexpected. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the backstory of how this film came to be and the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, I'm half Italian.
Oh,
Um,
there you go.
I I'm from LA. That's where I started my filmmaking career, at least on this side of the camera, I should say, for the last 15 years. And my wife and I made a decision to. We made two moves: first to Atlanta, and then to Oregon, to make some conscious decisions about how we wanted to spend our lives as artists, as filmmakers. My wife is an actor. And so we moved to Oregon for a lot of different reasons that are not related to the film, but with it, I bring my interests and my sensibilities, which, Sicily is my home. It's one of um, I've always referred to as my home. It's where I was born. Um, some of the action of the documentary takes place literally. You can see in some of the shots the house that I spent my summers in. Some of them. So this is a very personal story for me, and so I I think that this is the way filmmaking is going, certainly in the documentary world. That if you haven't seen a whole lot of submissions from Italian filmmakers, I hope more come, but certainly I think that you've seen lots of international submissions, and I think it's just a testament to the growth of the festival and the kinds of programs that you all put together. It's why I'm always eager to submit our films every year, provided it fits into the look and feel, because always filmmakers want to spare their ducats in that way. But it's a little piece of my heart. I mean, I'm a dogophile. I've got two dogs myself, two rescues, and the culture in Italy is just so peculiar, as what I would call it. That it is a system that is state sponsored abandonment, where they have a designation that kind of the dogs that kind of make them untouchable and unsavable and protected in a way that's kind of not really protecting them. It was sort of a triage kind of method to combat a really difficult problem, which is just dogs everywhere, because of a culture
Yeah.
thing.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And it totally just shines through in your film. And, it's fascinating to see, especially in 2023, where it's like, how can we still have this issue? And we see it in the States too, but it's a different form, especially with the policies and everything. Especially coming from the Southeast, my background, just like all the stray dogs there, and it's just this ongoing issue. So how do you kind of combat that, especially as a lover of dogs in this documentary? It's so heartbreaking, it's so beautiful. How do you kind of toe that line with your own emotions and just kind of struggling to tell the story in an advocacy sense too?
Well, in a practical sense, I wanted to spare the visuals. I wanted it to be something. Well, it's not short on visuals. I think it's a breathtaking sort of part of the world, and I try to like go with the rusticness and the dreaminess, the sort of like a fog that kind of pervades. That kind of is part of the reason that things ain't going to change, well, I'm hoping that's not the case, but the difficulty in things being able to change. And so because the main character is such a charismatic fella,
Yes.
um, and this is my opinion now.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I I really wanted to lean into his account of these dogs and sort of similar to some of the things that I hear. This is a weird analogy, but and a bad one, but maybe some of it works. But in terms of true crime and missing and murdered Indigenous women,
Wow.
how some of the storytellers take a lot of time to tell the stories of the people that were taken. And so this is a different subject matter entirely. But I think that there's something that comes across in how Stefano talks about these dogs and why he does what he does, that I wanted to kind of stay away. And this is sort of, can let the viewers off the hook a little bit, that it's not hopefully visually upsetting in
Right.
terms of some of the awful things that he describes. Um, so that's one thing, is that I wanted it to sort of have that sort of narrative feel as he sort of tells us about this. But the other thing that's kind of like, it's a bit of a tangent to your question, but I think it's an interesting point that I'd like to point out: the degree to which Stefano doesn't think that he's concerned that it's not going to change, and that's not to spoil anything, but sort of where maybe things get left, is that I think you may notice, and you may not want to ask this question, but I'll volunteer it. There's no Italian laurels on the thing. Like us filmmakers like to put laurels on our posters, at least some of the non-official ones. And if you notice, there's no Italian film film festivals. We haven't submitted to any, and the reason that we haven't submitted to any is because, unfortunately, my lead character is scared, and he did not give us permission to submit this in Italy.
Wow.
Yet. I'm hoping he changes his mind, but I very much needed to honor this as sort of the terms of usage for the material. And so that's kind of a story in itself, but I can't really talk about it too much other than to say that he's just concerned that the efforts that he undertakes to save the dogs is not appreciated by the townspeople and his neighbors, who have themselves undertaken methods to curb the dog population.
Wow. That is
I
really,
mean, it's its own documentary, isn't it? Like it's,
yeah.
and I just, maybe this is a good time to point out to filmmakers, sometimes you tell a story and you'll get access to a portion of it, but then there's going to be a whole nother portion to the story that you don't really get to tell. And that's just the reality. I've always thought that there's a larger story here. And because I've spent a lot of time in Italy, or not recently, but want to more, I definitely think there's a larger story in this. And I think that concept that we just talked about, that there's a fear there,
Yeah.
is he's not the only person that feels this way. Of course, that's the bad news. The good news is there's lots of people. There's a changing mentality in Italy that's just starting with sort of a younger generation, which you can see in some of the veterinarians, the professionals, who sort of talk about this in a way. And there's hopefully a glimmer of hope that might not be shared by our main character, where things can change. And so,
Totally.
10 minutes later, to your question, um, what needs to change? I think that part of the impetus for the film and to kind of get it out there is to put the spotlight on the efforts amongst sort of the younger community that are starting to come together to help address this problem.
Sure.
But it's an uphill climb.
Oh my gosh.
It's a real up, and this is all throughout Italy, not just Sicily.
That's fascinating. And so, as the documentary, as someone who, your job, your whole passion is telling stories and telling people's stories, but also understanding where they might draw a line. But for you, I mean, when I see this film, I think, oh my gosh, this is like a perfect film to help advocate for these changes and stuff. But if it's not being shown in Italy, does that still get to, your hopes or your goals for the film, maybe?
Ooh, some hardball questions. Let's go. Um, no, it's a big disappointment. What else can I say? I knew that those were the parameters going in,
Sure.
that he would not be willing to participate, because we were clear about what the end usage for this would be. And he said, I'm okay with everything, even in Europe, just not Italy because of these reasons. And so I embarked upon this with the hope that, and because granted, we are, I'd say, in the middle-ish of our run. Um, I'm hoping that the Italian festivals will leave the door open there at least for another year or so, because I do hope to convince him that there's the most important place for this to screen is in Italy, especially as a sort of a hybrid project, you know, produced in Italy, for all intents and purposes, but partly produced in Oregon, certainly on the post side, and the production company's here now, so. Um, I still have hopes. I still have hopes that number one, this film can and will screen in Italy, and I have hopes that I get to develop it later into a larger project where we start to get into a little bit more of um, the darker areas. Not so much the treatment of the dogs, but how the darker sort of how the people are preventing progress.
Wow, sure. Oh my gosh, and what an important story to tell at that. But so how did you meet Stefano and how has that relationship kind of progressed? Or, when I guess when I watched the film, the most heartbreaking and like angry moment is when you hear that these aides came down and they had $5,000 and Giorgio just or Stefano got the total short end of the stick with that, this broken bed and the food. And so it's like, how can I help? How can, we fundraise money for Stefano, so how has that relationship kind of grown? And what is Stefano looking like now? Still the same?
That's a really hard question. Yeah, the easy question is how I met him. I've met him through a network and through family. Um, you know, he's a very private man,
Mm.
very much technology. In fact, not to dovetail from this, but there seems to be a reoccurring theme in sort of the work that I'm working on now with subjects that have chosen not to do technology. Wonder what it says about me that I'm interested in these. I didn't know these things before I met them, but
Right.
and so contact is very difficult, and he keeps it that way intentionally. And so, not to be evasive, to your question, um, but he's very skeptical of of help help's ability to reach him because of some of the things that he details in the film. How to help? Um, I did ask him if he wanted me to set up some sort of foundation while screening the film, as a part of it. And he didn't seem real thrilled about the idea. I mean, he's into the idea of help, but also the idea of tagging an ask to a documentary film did feel a little much for the community, for the artistic community of being able to watch the film. But I also at the same time want to help the guy. And so what I would love to do is for people that are interested in this idea of possibly helping Stefano, is to keep in touch with our production company, Soul of Wit Films, on Facebook, and to follow the progress of the film. And I think that once we get to the resolution of the run and we start to get into this idea of screening in Italy, I think I might like to revisit that subject. And hopefully we'll be able to. I mean, the ask is always at the time that somebody sees the film and wants to help, but I don't know that he's yet prepared for that.
Right.
And we also wanted to not burden a festival with that. But you're asking about it, so I want to honor it, and I think I'd like to. In fact, my I have operatives in Italy currently, and I can send the word along because that's how we have to do it. I literally have to get a letter. Like I can't even send him a letter or an email. I have to get pieces of paper to him through other people there.
Wow.
Not special forces or something. He's not like CIA, Italian intelligence or anything. He's a very private man, and he lives his life, and not even his family understands.
Sure.
And unfortunately, that wasn't part of the story either. But I wonder if that might be of a larger story of
Well,
one's own family not even be able to understand the efforts that one undertakes.
that is fascinating. It's so interesting from like an outsider's perspective, and this is what documentaries do, right? You're like admiring Stefano and all the work he's putting into that. And maybe that's a cultural thing too, where we are so beloved to our pets here, and I think it also kind of says that in the first 3 minutes of the film, the quote, "The greatness of a country is measured by how it treats its animals." The veterinarian says that. And I thought that just struck such a chord and it hit so hard. And I think any dog lover or cat lover or owner can definitely appreciate that, or wildlife in general. So yeah, that really struck a chord with me.
Just a testament to how the finger on the pulse is of the younger generation in Italy. I mean, I think Giorgio is like, I think we're the same age. He's like in his early 40s, so I don't have to be young. Like, but in comparison to what it seems to
Yeah,
me like a bunch of old men running Italy, although now let's talk about fascism that's alive and well, or at least its new brand, which is female at this time, I will say. Um, but the point being that um, the way that they speak about it so intelligently, none of this stuff is prompted. I mean, this was a real conversation that was happening between these subjects, and I think as any filmmaker can appreciate, sometimes you get into a great story, and you sometimes have to you gotta pull the horses through the water a little bit, because there's a lot of things going on in a real doc, some real stakes at hand, and so there's fear, there's all these things going on. But not with these cats. They were ready to talk. They were ready to to share their inside view on the difficulty, but also what needs to change. And it's just a cultural awareness. It's
absolutely.
people. It's coming from the community of the people. And so, to your point, yeah, this absolutely needs to screen in Italy.
Yes, yes. And I mean, also just a quick moment to shout out, everyone in your documentary, especially the veterinarians shown, because that is such a difficult profession to be in. And it has such a high rate of, just depression because it's such a difficult job. You go in because you love the animals. And we see that here in Southern Oregon too. And it's just so hard to see what the animals go through. And especially hearing those stories about the street dogs, it's just heartbreaking. So really kudos to your whole team and kudos to everybody who's involved in the film.
Well, I appreciate it. It's so many more people like them, and it's a network. And um, I really hope that it's something that I get to revisit. And it's also, and I think this is up to we the filmmakers to be innovative and to present it in a way that's new. And I include myself in that challenge, even starting today, which is that I do think that there is a little bit of a, not a stigma, but a difficulty in sort of programming sometimes with the sort of the animal cruelty films, that it just sort of takes on a little bit of an emotional weight that becomes difficult to program. Maybe I don't want to speak for you all. This is not my dimension now, but like, just because it feels just so like heavy and all that. Um, that sometimes there's it's just how it's treated. It kind of gets stuck into their own category. And I really appreciate the programming that you all have done, including the inclusion of our film, and just sort of frame things in a way that gets the conversation going. And I think that when I take this project to its next iteration in how to present this issue, that would be the task before me, is to try to frame a feature length documentary um, in a way that is also um, um, dynamic and interesting to the programmers in how it's framed. And what I'm sort of thinking in my mind, there was a lovely film out of Turkey 2 years ago that was from the perspective of the dogs. Um, like no words. It's like GoPro camera essentially, I'll find it for you. It was a cats or dogs. It was really well done, and it was
Oh,
3 years ago now. I don't know. I'm in pandemic
okay. I know.
time dilation, so it might have been 1 year. I'm not sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fascinating. And yeah, just loved this film. We're so happy to have it in the film festival this year. So as far as programming goes and everything, it is always interesting, pairing up with different films and things like that. But we're very excited about this kind of connections block that we have it in. But Giorgio, if you want to speak a little bit, I'm curious about Soul of Wit Films and how your production got started and everything like that. So if you wanted to take a little bit to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. The production company got started in 2011 when I was in LA looking to screenwrite myself into an acting project for myself. I went to a great undergraduate program at the University of Virginia and went to graduate school at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. But in Virginia, I was in a year where we just had superstars. I don't know how else to put it. And so I had a couple of really close friends, and I wrote this piece um, for um, Sarah Drew, who's had a great run on Grey's Anatomy,
Yeah,
um,
April.
and yeah, that's right. And our professor, Richard Warner, and so I wrote this piece for them
Wow.
as a sort of a. They've had a lovely relationship over the years, as is Richard with all his disciples. And so I wrote this piece about a father and daughter reconnecting through the afterlife, sort of a magical realism piece, a narrative piece, um, sort of like the Adjustment Bureau meets What Dreams May Come. That project will definitely be developed into a feature at some point. But I've fallen into the doc world, so let's more news on that. But so that's how it got started. It got started to get out there and to make projects, to do it, to stop waiting for phone calls. And so we left LA in 2017 to expand. We went to Georgia. There was lots of production going on there, but politically, that things didn't go well for me there. I'm just going to leave that there. With the 2018 heartbeat bill, I had a very difficult time, my wife and I being there as people. And we decided that and the heat was too much. Literally, the heat, I just like could not take it.
I'm from Memphis. I understand you, Joe. Tell me, yeah.
And now here's the important bit. We made it a life choice to move back to the West Coast to take the time to focus on doing the work that we wanted to do. This is a real end game life goal decision at the age of 35. Um, um, to start that process now. And we picked Oregon, and I'll tell you why, in our trailer as we crossed the border from California into Klamath Falls. And we drove into the state and we said, what the hell? This place is gorgeous. And so we had a little bit of an RV trip for that summer that we had planned, and we fell in love with Oregon and then set off to move here. So, and I'll speak for myself, not for my wife, to say that I wanted to start to spend my time focusing on documentary film production, working on the projects that I wanted to. We were in post production with Vagrant when that happened, and within months, I I found what I'm calling my magnum opus, which is a story that I'm in production with now, which I just will say is one of the most, I think, one of the most important stories in American history, occurring on the coast of Oregon right now, that really hasn't been reckoned with, about a shipwreck that may have inspired the Goonies.
Wow. Oh my gosh, how exciting. I cannot wait to see that film submitted to the Climate Film Festival.
Me too. um, we're in production and development, sort of I think all the independent filmmakers will appreciate. We're sort of in a salad of a phase, where we've been in pre-production, production, and development, kind of all at the same time, where we're developing what is possibly a documentary film, but also possibly a limited series in talks with partnerships in LA, which, as everybody knows, is on fire right now.
And a hurricane.
And on underwater.
Yeah.
The fire was a metaphor in terms of the strikes, which are absolutely important and difficult, I would think, for film festivals coming into the fall now to be able to have their events and not have narrative projects be able to be represented by the talent and the people that created it. That really stinks. But this comes at a really important time that can I just politically say here for a second that the idea that we are running off of speculative contracts from 2008, and these pirates have been had the luxury of being able to sap the energy from the creative communities that created the work. And now it's time to reverse that trend and to compensate the people that have spent their lives doing this so that they can feed their families. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. And great way to segue into that.
I mean,
no,
well, I'm a small production company. I mean, we try to do things right, and hopefully we're not the target. But we very much, we are allies of both all of the unions that are in the fight here, and we think that they have now the moral high ground and the weight of the world really behind them to understand. Yeah, all the shows I watch them on Netflix, Amazon, HBO, and Hulu. Like, what are they? What's the? I don't watch anything on cable TV.
Right. Absolutely. For Giorgio. I mean, that's just the way that it is now. I mean, for anybody, I would totally agree. But we also stand with our creative allies for sure.
We know it. We know it.
Yeah. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, Giorgio. Was there anything else you wanted to add about Vagrant or Soul of Wit?
I don't think so. All I will say is that we are just so happy to participate. There are so many wonderful festivals in Oregon, and you all are one of them. And so we are just so happy to share films that are from the community. Granted, the action takes place in a faraway place. Very much in the ethos of what I'm trying to do here with Soul of Wit Films is to tell stories that are from the community, like the one I'm working on now, but also the sort of the relationship in supporting filmmakers at a local level, I think is incredibly important. Case in point, in the 1980s, there were so many projects being made here in Oregon, so many. And there are some now. There were a lot more in the early aughts. I look forward to production returning to Oregon and you getting just like a tidal wave, so to speak. Sort of the action of my current project involves them, tsunamis and such. But I just really hope to see you get a massive influx of Oregon filmmakers, especially as some of those filmmakers leave California and find other places to set up their roots, because there's just so much here. And as we work on the infrastructure a little bit to provide those resources to be able to to get projects going, I think that culturally this is the right place for filmmaking.
Wow, I love that. You were doing my job for me, Giorgio. As the
Well, I'm gonna try.
film office for Klamath County, we work a lot with films and we have a full film library equipment that Klamath Film members can rent from. So I look forward to also seeing a lot more films coming to Oregon and Southern Oregon and throughout the region.
I hopefully get a chance to toast with you here next month. We'll see how that shakes down, but we're just so happy to be a part of the festival, and congratulations on the programming. And it's a very difficult time, and I just, I'm sure getting through the last 2 years was really hard for film festivals. And so kudos for kind of the other side, whatever that may be, although the strike is,
Yeah.
complicating things, but, we appreciate all the support of filmmakers. We really do.
Thank you so much, Giorgio. We so appreciate it.